Alright guys, this is the cleaned up version of the Q&A. I redid it just for you. First question was, hey Mike, I train 5-6 times a week, I eat clean, but my stress level is high, my sleep is horrible. Am I making no gains? It sounds like me. Like, this is a horrible city to sleep. Stress is always there. And you know, life happens, right? So yeah, you should do anything you can to manage stress and sleep and so on and so forth, but stress is also positive, right? Training is a stress, and without stress you would die. And if you stress about stress, then guess what? That gets even worse. So just adapt to it and move on. Number two was, what do you think of cheat days and cheat meals? Nothing. Zero. I think it's a really stupid idea, and here's why. So whenever I heard the term cheat, then there's something missing in your relationship with food, meaning you're deprived or whatever. So cheat days, I've seen people destroying 8,000 calories in a day. That means your diet is done. They also turn into cheat weeks, right? Cheat meals is sort of, I also don't get that term because, so I'll give an example. I take my kids rock climbing on Fridays and afterwards we go for pizza. I have 2 slices, rock them to my macros, and that's the end of it, right? But I don't feel like, oh, if I don't have this particular food, then the world is ending. So that's just an unhealthy relationship with food, and you should be able to work in the foods that you like into your macros, right? Maybe not the whole pie, but a slice, okay? Mike, do you think that traditionally like the bench press, the deadlift, and the squat are obsolete for bodybuilding? I mean, I wouldn't say obsolete. Like, I would not recommend conventional deadlift to anybody but a powerlift. It's just very dangerous. There's a low muscle building effect. The bench and the squat, it goes more to what are you trying to do. So the bench press for someone like me with long arms is a very poor pec builder and has a very high risk of injury. So that's, if I want to train my chest, that's just not a good idea. For my triceps, that could be a different story, right? Same with squats. Like, I have short legs, so my fibular tibial lengths, they're pretty much perfect. They're 1-on-1, the ratio. So I'm good at squatting, not because I'm so great, but just because I have the mechanics. So I get a lot of quad activation when I squat. I don't fall forward, right? So that makes a good exercise. But in the end, it's always like, stop thinking about exercises and stop being pigeonholed and think more like, what am I trying to train, right? As opposed to like, I should be doing this. Mike, what do I do if I have to eat out a lot? Well, remember this from my Wall Street days, it can be tricky. I know you have a dinner. Here's what you not do. You don't bring your Tupperware with your chicken and broccoli to your brother's wedding. You eat a little bit less during the day, and then at that particular dinner, you eat some dead animals with some vegetables. Because you can't control the carbs, but you can control, you can control the carbs, but you cannot control the fats. Sorry about that. What else? I was always a believer of never training the same muscle in twice in a row. Why we do this in some programs. Well, that's an urban legend. I mean, remember Apollo Ono, the speed skater, his quads, humongous. Robert Firstman, bicyclist, bigger quads than any bodybuilder I've ever seen. And do you think this guy only cycles on Tuesdays? Apollo Ono squatted 12 times a week, up to 15, right? So yes, you can only train the same muscle, especially with a smaller muscle, 2 days in a row, because most of the time, outside the workout, we don't do anything, right? There's plenty of rest. So that's fine. What is active recovery versus a superset? So I'm not a fan of training antagonists back to back, because then you're just pushing, one muscle into stretch and contraction, and then you're doing the opposite, but the body doesn't really have time to adjust and the form suffers. It's just not a good idea. But let's say you're doing chest, and then there's like flies, press, dips or whatever, and at some point you just burn out, right? So now you can sit around for 10 minutes and do nothing, or do you do like a dynamic stretch by training the antagonist lightly, let's say lat pull down or some rows, get the stretch in, and then you can go back to pressing, and vice versa. You train your lats, and then from there on you can do like a light fly or light press to relax them, stretch them out, and move from there. That makes sense? Good. What's the average rate of fat loss? Never enough, right? I guess. So conservatively speaking, I would say you should achieve about 0.5 to 1% of body weight of weight loss a week. That's to keep it off, right? Let's say you weigh 200 pounds, 100 kilo, whatever, then 2 pounds or 1 kg would be the absolute highest I would go for, because you don't want to lose muscle, because then that's just you have it, being a lower BMR and you become skinny fat. Muscle loss is pretty slow, unfortunately. So as a male, I would say 3/4 of a pound to a pound a month, unless you're like a teenager, that's a different story. But annualized, that's still up to 12 pounds, which is a lot of beef. So since bodybuilding is about aesthetics, you have to think, if you lose, let's say 5 grapefruits, right, that's 5 pounds of fat, then the scale, okay, might not be moving all that much, but you look very differently. And if you over a year pack on 12 pounds of muscle, then you also look very different, right? What's my body fat? Well, it doesn't really matter, because there's 2 options. You have abs or you don't. If as a male you don't have an outline of abs, you're too fat, you gotta keep dieting. If you have abs, that's great, but again, this isn't who has the lowest body fat, this is who looks the best. What do I mean by this? So I have pretty low body fat year round, but let's say I go to Germany or whatever, and I eat a little bit more, and then I put on, let's say, maybe 2 pounds, right? But sadly, because I'm old, I put them here on my sides. And then my physique is ruined, because I look like a fridge, right? So I can kick and scream and say, but my body fat is still really, really low. That's cool, but by the looks of it, it's just not all that good, right? What else here? How do you suggest breaking through a plateau? That's a good question. So when you encounter a plateau, which personally I believe that only comes very late in your training level when your physique is very developed, the first thing I would do is nothing. Meaning, first I would check everything that I'm doing and whether I'm doing it properly. So very often people, when they actually dial in, they find, oh, holy cow, I'm overeating by 200 calories a day, that's why I'm not losing weight. Or I'm rushing the exercises, and that's why I'm not getting anywhere, right? So optimize what you're doing first, and then if that does not work, you can do different things. One option is get a membership to a different gym for like a week, right? New machines, new stimulus, new angles, that can work. Or try simply like a little bit of pulses and so on and so forth. What is that? Are there people in the contest using PEDs? I don't know. I'm not having people send their blood work and their urine and I take samples. That's just, I don't know. That's not what I'm gonna do. But intermittent fasting set my gut right. Okay. There's a lot of talk about like gut health and probiotics and this, that, the other. And it's like, everybody pump the brakes. Unless you have like some disease like Crohn's or whatever. As long as you consume one of the following: yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, had to say it, being German, or kimchi, something fermented, on a daily basis, guess what? Your gut's perfectly fine, right? There's no need to worry about anything else. Intermittent fasting is a very, very poor bodybuilding tool, because you simply can't spread out the protein, and it has this weird belief that if I only eat in this window, I will lose weight, right? And that's just not the case. Calories still matter. So it's sort of like a cultish thing. People believe like their growth hormone goes up like crazy, which is simply not true, because if that was true, why would anybody be spending 5-6 grand a month and break the law to get growth hormone when they could just not eat breakfast, right? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, there was that. We covered this one. How many sets is too many? Well, that's a good question. So, from doing this for a while, I would say most people, after 24 sets, they start producing sort of like garbage reps, right? What I mean by this is, yeah, they're doing stuff, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're doing stuff. They're not actually training the muscle. So it's almost like, let's say you were a coder, right? And then you code, and you have this Red Bull fueled night, and you code even more, but it's all trash. So next morning, you have to rewrite the entire code. So if you taught your muscles bad code, so to speak, next workout you have to retrain them, right? What do you think of muscle confusion? It doesn't exist, okay? Muscles cannot be confused because that would imply that they have a brain. Like, I might as well confuse this bottle. That's not gonna happen. What people mean by this is like, what if I change my workout like randomly all the time? Will that be better? But let's think about this. Imagine today is Wednesday. You take a German class. Tomorrow, you take a French class. Friday, you take a Russian class. And then Saturday, you take Spanish. And you keep rotating. What have you learned after 8 weeks? Nothing, right? Whereas if you take like 8 weeks of French, you'd actually have learned something. So execution matters, right? A great deal. And if you're constantly changing the exercises, I mean, unless you are very, very good at this, you're not gonna master execution. And that means fewer fibers will be activated, and that also means fewer gains, okay? How about I train faster to activate my type 2 fibers? No. So first of all, muscle fibers are being used in the order of strength, right? So type 2, the weaker ones go first and then move up. There's no way in hell you could activate only the type 2 fibers. The type 1 fibers are being used first and then the body moves up. So when somebody tells you that they can, through explosiveness or whatever, create more type 2 fibers, that's not possible. You can transform type 2 fibers into type 1, which is not something you want, but not the other way around. That's simply unscientific. What about genetics, Mike? Genetics matter, right? Like, for instance, I have no hand-eye coordination, right? Like, you can have Roger Federer and Serena Williams teach me tennis and I will still be horrible. I just don't have it, right? In bodybuilding, that's very different because we're not striving to win the Mr. Olympia. We're striving for a nice beach physique, right? And that is very much, anybody can accomplish that. You know, somebody might take longer, whatever, but genetics really only play a role in, if you want to go really high, like pro level, right? But for what we're doing, that's not really a factor. What's the goal of the contest? For me as a coach personally, the goal is to help everyone in this contest to get to the best shape they can by summer. And I'm honored that you trust me with your physique, and I will continue to do my very best. And I shall see you guys next Wednesday. My God.